Edgar Allan Poe. You know him. Some of you may love him. You are probably familiar with his works, whether that is Annabel Lee, The Raven, or The Telltale Heart. Those are some of students' favorites and mine as well. I knew my husband was a keeper when one of the first gifts he bought me was one of those really nice copies of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry from Barnes and Noble back in the day. I still have it. It's very pretty. But Edgar Allan Poe is an American author who is sometimes known as the first American Gothic author. So American Gothic spans novels like Frankenstein's stories that deal with the supernatural and the grotesque, and that later spawned the genre of the Southern Gothic, which is people like Flannery O'Connor, who write about kind of despicable people in certain parts of the world, specifically the South. So in this story that we're reading for Introduction to Literature, you might not have read or heard of it before. And I have a tendency to find students either love or hate this story. It's a little bit denser and it's a little bit harder to chew, harder to get around at first, and I wanted to explain a little bit. As you probably know and can see from his birth to death date, Edgar Allan Poe had a pretty short life. He was orphaned at a very young age, adopted by a wealthy uncle. Edgar married his, I think, 11 or 12-year-old cousin. She died when she was young. He had gambling problems. He got into trouble at school. And there's some speculation that he might have died from rabies by being bitten from a bat. So he had a very interesting and sadly short life with a lot of grief in between it. And so it's no wonder that some of his pieces are rather dark. This piece I'm having you read for our class is called The Cask of Amontillado. And the setting is in Italy, and it is two primary characters, Montresor and Fortunato. And these two characters have known each other a long time, and they have a tricky relationship. I'm trying to remember which character is which. Montresor is the main character who's talking, and he is the one who is talking directly to the reader and recounting what happened 50 years ago. And apparently Fortunato, the other character in the story, did something to him that made him very upset. And so he devised a way to get rid of him that involved luring him into this catacomb, this cave, if you will, to sample Amontillado. Amontillado is a fancy Spanish wine. So supposedly there's a cask, a big barrel of this fancy Amontillado wine. And so Montresor is going, "Hey, Fortunato, I want you to come here and test this wine and tell me if it's any good." And Fortunato's kind of got a big ego about his wine knowledge. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, sure, I'll follow you." And his demise ensues at the hands of Montresor. So the language in this particular piece is not like we talk today. So there's going to be some getting around that. And there's a lot of back and forth without saying who said what. So you kind of have to follow the train of who's speaking, but know that Montresor is the narrator. He's the person who does the evil to the other guy. Fortunato is the other main character. We don't know as much about him, and we never learn what he did to make Montresor so mad. And there's a couple reasons why. Partially, it could be because it was nothing, and it seems really insignificant and not worthy of murdering somebody else. Or probably, knowing Poe, he wanted you to imagine, what would someone have to do to you over the course of your friendship for you to murder them in this fashion, if you can take yourself to thinking that far? So that's what's happening in this particular story. And at the end, we know that Montresor is telling this story to someone, and that he starts it with, "You who know me so well." And there's speculation that we don't know who he's talking to. Is he talking to the reader? Is he talking to a priest on his deathbed? Is he talking to his children? Lots of unanswered questions in this particular story, and you're not necessarily going to get the answers after you've read it, but that's part of what makes literature, particularly this piece by Poe, so intriguing. So enjoy The Cask of Amontillado